Please.
I say seated looks good to me. Let's do that. Let me just make sure my audio is where it's supposed to be. All right, cool. Yeah, so just something nice and easy. Oh, let your breath start to soften. So think about how we can not only round the edges off the catches off the transitions into more smooth integrations, but think about how the actual act of the breath itself can just be more delicate. We'll give ourselves a little bit of time here, another 60 seconds. Just playing into that delicateness of the breath. Let's take an inhale and sweep both arms straight up and overhead so that we we reach those arms into some length here. Pay attention to how the shoulders are feeling. And then let's just take ourselves forward into a seated version of fold. One of my favorite ways to just both warm up the body and get a little feedback from the body of how it's doing is this little seated cross leg forward fold. Ourselves 15 more seconds here. Yeah, nice. Good. Just finding that low back link expansion. And as you're right, we can slowly walk ourselves back up in the seat. And let's transition right into hands and knees tabletop. Finding our way into that stability of tabletop, that familiarity of tabletop. And then push the left leg straight back right at hip height. So we get just a little bit of flex there. And then just balance the weight distribution across the hands and delicately bring that left leg back down so that it sits right in line with the right. We'll take that right leg straight back. Again, flexing the quad so that there is some pretty good leg engagement there. And then just balancing our weight distribution. Keeping the neck nice and long, gaze is roughly straight down. Right knee comes back down and mirrors the left. We'll curl both toes underneath us and just roll back into a nice delicate version of down dog. So down dog here is the exploration of the shape. It is an opportunity again, like that seated forward fold, to just check in with how the body is responding to what we're doing or what we're asking from it. And then let's come back down to hands and knees. As we set up in that tabletop, slide slide the tailbone back into child's pose. Land in your child's pose and think about your hips. Just melting, compressing on the front side, softening on the back side. Torso combining with gravity to give you a little bit of compression there. Last 5 seconds back in this child's pose. We'll pull ourselves back forward to hands and knees, tabletop when you're ready. Send your right leg straight back behind you like we did this first cycle through. Keep those hips nice and level. Then plant the right toe mound. So right toe mound comes on the mat. And we just roll right up into this little modified version of down dog. The weight here is in that right heel. The right calf is receiving kind of the burden of the shortness of the posterior chain. And then eventually we're going to do this really unkind thing and pull that left leg up into lunge, right? That's a hard transition, especially this early in class. We haven't warmed up the hips at all, and I'm asking us to do really hard things. Let's inhale and sweep both arms up and overhead into crescent once we get into this space. Keep that anterior of the body nice and taut, nice and neutral. Use that hip functionality so the legs are active. And then we float the hands back down to the mat. Step the left leg back into down dog. So we mirror in down dog. Feel that little bit of asymmetry. Come down to hands and knees. Tabletop. And then take that left leg straight back and behind you. Left leg gets that length, right? So we want to feel that quad flex. We want to feel the hips nice and level. Left toe mound comes down. We rock back into this modified version of down dog. We feel the burden of the shape at that left calf, high insertion here. And then we just feel the heel hold the energy and help us lengthen that calf tissue out. Eventually, we slide that right foot forward, big ask of the hip into lunge, maybe taking a couple steps to make that happen, and sweep ourselves up into this second side of the first crescent of class. Finding our way to a neutral neck alignment, neutral shoulder alignment, neutral hip alignment, and then float the hands back down to the mat. And we'll step the right foot back and into down dog. Come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet, and sink your way back into child's pose. Second time in child's pose here, a little bit more room around the hips. Try to take that, transition that into low back give. We'll give ourselves 30 seconds here just to settle into that new hip space. A little lower posterior chain warm up here before we get into some of our standing shapes, more of the standing shapes. When you're right, when you're ready, fingertips grip into the mat. Let's inhale. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From your hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog. Explore the down dog. Note that you have that calf space, but it might not necessarily translate into hamstring space. So think about getting all the way into that calf space and then lifting the hips up, trying to get as much space as we can along that posterior chain. We'll eventually lift our gaze to the front of the mat, step or float our way forward to a fold, and then we'll inhale into half lift. Back gets flat here, top of the head stays extending out towards the front of the room. Really think about that length, and then exhale all the way back into your fold. Let gravity take over here. Let the fold just release your head into that length. Then we're going to drift our awareness to our sacrum, roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, coming all the way up, eventually head and neck. And from this space, we're going to take our hands and we're going to place them on that sacrum diamond shape. So thumbs together, index fingers together, and squeeze back through the shoulder blades, squeeze in through the core, and squeeze down into the quad. So you get really active, really strong. And then we feel the anterior of the shoulders with this hand positioning here, squeezing those shoulders back. So focus, usually I'm talking shoulder blade, shoulder blade, shoulder blade, but here focus is really front of the shoulders rolling back. We want to feel this front side pec minor here really starting to feel into the space we're asking of it. That's going to be a little bit of a path here through this mid portion of class. Eventually, we'll release our hands, sweep up and overhead, and interlace the fingers. Now, palms can be down or palms can be up, whatever feels most appropriate for you. Press down and flex back into those quads once again. Think about a big neutral body. And then release the hands as you exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Top of the head once again points out. Think about a big upside down L and then all the way back into the fold. Low back releasing. Plant your hands. Walk yourself back into plank. In plank, flex the quads and the glutes like we just were in mountain. So there is full stability here. Think about being locked in and then lower yourself down to your belly. And then from our belly, we're going to go traditional baby cobra here. So hands stay right where they are. Forehead, quads flex, tops of the feet press in. Forehead comes maybe like an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches off the mat. No more than that. Let's keep it nice and gentle. Try to feel posterior chain activation around the thoracic spine, right? So get some of that subscapular musculature. See if maybe you just barely start to interact with that lumbar spine soft tissue. We get just a little bit of that low back musculature to get involved in the shape. And then just exhale, release. Slide your hands underneath your forehead here. Little crocodile pose. Not going to be a long hold here. We'll give ourselves about 15 seconds. Just enough to feel the shoulders relax a little bit. Inhale, slide your hands back underneath those shoulders. Splay the fingers out wide, as big a hands as you can possibly make. When you're ready, inhale, pull yourself forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog, walk or float forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide your left foot straight back into lunge. Land that lunge. Sweep yourself up into crescent, just touching crescent, and then floating the hands back down to the mat. Ground your left heel. Take your right hand to the medial edge, big toe edge of the right foot, and inhale, open the left hand up into touch side angle. So not hanging in these shapes, just touching them, and then coming right back down. We're going to sweep ourselves back up and into crescent. This time, hands are going to slide back and create that diamond on the tailbone. So shoulders start to squeeze back. Think of front of the shoulders rolling open. And then once you get that shoulder set, torso stays neutral. Think about sinking into the hips by pushing back into the left heel, not bending the left knee. So we're driving back as we sink back into the hips. And as you sink back, there's a little more room for those shoulders. See if we can find that space. And then we'll sweep our arms up. Float those hands down to the mat. Step the left foot back forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Reset at this half point. So top of the head points out, gaze straight down, big upside down L. And then exhale back into your fold. Right foot slides back into lunge. We sweep ourselves up into crescent, touch the top of the shape, float the hands back down to the mat, ground the right heel, take the left hand to the medial edge, big toe edge of the left foot, and open yourself up in a side angle. Touch that side angle, right hand comes back down, right heel spins back up. We sweep ourselves up and into crescent. Take the hands to the sacrum. Index finger together, thumbs together. Squeeze the shoulders back. Drop into the depth of the shape. Squeeze the shoulders back into that additional space we've created. And just feel that front of the shoulder expansion. And then sweep those arms up. Float the hands down on the mat. We'll step forward. And into fold. Inhale into half lift. Reset. Low back flat. Neck neutral. Gaze down, and then exhale back into your fold. Plant your hands. Walk yourself back into plank. Reestablish that sensation of stability in plank, then lower yourself down to your belly. As we come down to our belly, yeah, nice. As we come down to the belly, take the hands and we're gonna go to the width of the mat. Now, if you have a really narrow mat, you maybe go a little bit wider. But we're really taking the hands out pretty wide here. So not all the way into cactus. I want you still to have the elbows slightly elevated, but forehead's gonna plant this time. Quads flex, tops of the feet press in, and then push your elbows out towards the edges of the room. The goal here, so elbows are kind of up. We're kind of just in a, I don't know, an awkward shape is what we're in. But try to feel the anterior shoulder crease, creating separation. So the elbows are pushing out enough that we feel kind of the humeral head and the collarbone start to get a little sensation of separation. And then relax the elbows, slide the hands back underneath the shoulders, and give yourself that baby cobra energy once again. So forehead gets a little bit of a lift, maybe 1.5, 2.5 inches. Maybe the sternum starts to get involved here. Now, the key is we have some of this anterior shoulder fatigue here. So really feel the back side of the body doing all of this work to pull back the front of the body towards the ceiling here and to get some of this lateral expansion. Maybe we get into some of that low back space. And relax. Slide your hands underneath your forehead. And just breathe a little in crocodile pose. So there's this little girl. She's maybe 5 or 6 years old. And she's in the middle of this dirt road, surrounded by not much. There's a ramshackle house behind her. And she is holding a stick. And you're right. When you're ready, engage or slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. Engage the musculature just above the knees. Let's press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're going to curl the toes, lift the seat, find the way all the way back into down dog. Drive down across the finger mounds here. Think about pushing the hands away from you. And as the hands push away from you, because they can't go anywhere, feel that rebound energy up the arms and try to transition that all the way into the tailbone. And then let's take our right leg and extend it straight back and behind us. And then we'll step the right foot forward and into lunge. Ground your left heel and keep the right knee nice and bent. So we're going to just keep the hands where they are and give yourself like half lift energy. So maybe you come up onto the fingertips here, but imagine, we're in warrior one alignment here, but we're not coming all the way up into the shape. But I want you to feel the legs of warrior one. And then relax back down. Slide your left heel up and sweep yourself up and into crescent. A little bit less stability here. There's a little bit of fatigue on the right hamstring. Hands are going to come back to the diamond sacrum space, and we're going to give ourselves that full squeeze. This time we're going to take the chin up, and as the chin comes up, there's even more room for the shoulders to squeeze back. Shoulder blades are obviously involved, but really think about the front corners of the shoulders rolling back here. And then sweep the arms up, let the chin come back to neutral, retouch crescent, float the hands down to the mat, and we'll step the right foot back and into down dog. Shift your weight forward into plank, squeeze your glutes, reset your balance, and then lift your seat back into down dog. Throw the left leg straight back and behind you. Step the left foot forward and into lunge. Ground your right heel, and then we just come up into that half lift energy. So you get warrior one alignment, hips are pointed straight forward, anterior hip crease hugging back, but we're just coming into that portion where the torso would lift. And then relax yourself back down, spin your right heel up, sweep yourself up into this little bit of an unstable crescent, slide your hands to your sacrum, squeeze the shoulders back, get that space, lift the chin. As you do, take those shoulders back even more. Find all of that room. The stability here comes clearly not from our field of vision, right? From just the leg energy, toe mound energy, toe mound to toe mound energy. Head comes back to neutral, arms sweep back up into crescent. Float the hands down on the mat. Step back into down dog. Shift your weight forward into plank. Squeeze the glutes to balance, and then lift the seat back into down dog. You come back into this down dog, fire into those finger mounds once again. Feel that rebound energy, pushing up the arms and transition it all the way to the tailbone. And then we'll walk ourselves forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift, upside down L. Top of the head pushes away from the tailbone. Exhale all the way back into fold. Sweep yourself all the way up and overhead. And exhale the hands to heart center. With the hands to heart center, slide your right foot straight back into lunge. Ground your right heel. And just hands are staying at heart center here. So we're rolling open. I, of course, shouldn't have done this one backwards, what we did, but hands stay at heart center. Broaden out across the collarbone, and then sink into the shape by pushing into the pinky toe edge of the back foot and dropping into that space. Now take your hands to your hips and just squeeze those shoulders back. Gaze here is going to be straight out, so not forward, not backward, but straight to the edge of your room. And then turn your head to the front of the room and blossom open into warrior two. Squeeze across the core. Think about that depth of our shape. Spin the back heel up. We'll come back into crescent. Float the hands down to the mat. We'll step forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sweep ourselves all the way up and overhead. Exhale, hands come to heart center. Once we're settled at heart center, our left foot slides back. We ground our left heel and roll to two. We come into two. We don't have the torso requirement. So we're just getting the positioning and then sinking in pinky toe edge to that back foot. We always have that lateral edge awareness on the front quad. And then hands come to the hips, gaze is straight out, and those shoulders just roll right back. As the shoulders roll back, we feel how this medial line in the hips corresponds to that energy, right? We have that warrior two openness, or about at max capacity to begin with. And then we blossom open into full two, turn our gaze towards the front of the room. Keep that mid-body squeezed. In the left heel up, we'll come back and into crescent, float the hands down to the mat. We'll step forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Top of the head reaches, exhale back into fold. Plant your hands, walk yourself back into plank. And then slowly, gently, delicately lower yourself down to your belly. We're going back to our hands wide. So hands are coming out to the width of the mat. This time we're going to come up onto the fingertips. So like your hands are little spiders on the edges of your mat. We come up onto those fingertips, and then we're gonna give ourselves the baby cobra energy from here. So neck stays long, but we start to lift the forehead away from our mat. And then once you get into the top of your baby cobra, then we're gonna take those elbows and we're gonna push them towards the edges of the room. So now we have some pretty good energy across that collarbone and a lot of low back requirement to maintain the stability here. Don't forget the quad and glute engagement to help support that low back musculature. And then relax and slide your hands underneath your forehead. Nice work. That is an awful lot of work there. So this little girl has this stick. She's in the middle of a dirt road, surrounded by pretty much nothing. And she takes this stick and she draws this huge circle. And as she's starting to draw the circle, this smile starts to appear on her lips. And by the time the circle is complete, she is ear to ear in this smile. We'll give ourselves about 20 more seconds here. And she steps in this circle and she just starts to jump, just straight up and down. And as she starts to move, that smile gets even bigger. When you're right, when you're ready, bring some strength into the musculature just above the knees. Feel the fingerprints slide back under the shoulders. Let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we'll curl our toes, we'll lift our seat, we'll find our way back into down dog, and we're gonna take our right leg and extend it straight back and behind us. Then bend your right knee and let the bottom of the right foot point over towards the left side of the room. And as you're doing this, gaze back towards your left heel. Make sure it's pointing straight towards the back of your mat. And you keep lifting that right knee, that right hip, and keep ensuring that that left heel points straight back towards the back of the mat. And then we'll step that right foot forward and into lunge. And from lunge, pull your left foot forward, maybe like 8 to 24 inches. So forward enough that you can ground your heel. And that's really the most important thing. We want to have a wide enough base that we can be stable, but forward enough that you can ground your heel. And then slide back into your right hamstring until you feel the right hamstring start to activate. And then bend your right knee so you have a little more strength in the right foot and sweep yourself up. Overhead, hands come to heart center. We just want to get to the point where we can get vertical here. So now we have a little bit of slack in that right leg. We're going to take that slack out of the system. Both feet are really active. So even though I'm wearing socks, you can see there's a pretty good arch going on in that front foot as I try to fall over. But hold that energy and then squeeze into the glutes. So glutes lock us in. Hands are going to come back to our diamond shape, and we're going to squeeze those shoulders back towards the back of the room. Now, we do not need to have this right hamstring fully flexed out. So I want you to have stability in the right leg more than I want you to have a fully locked out hamstring, more than I want you to have an energized hamstring. So think about stability in that front leg as we take ourselves halfway forward into fold. So the top of the head reaches out towards the front of our room, gazes straight down, and then at the peak of this shape, start to squeeze your shoulders up towards the ceiling. And when you can no longer squeeze the shoulders up towards the ceiling, we're going to start to slowly lift and retract our torso back to our starting shape. Sweep the arms up and overhead. And then exhale the hands back to that same spot on the sacrum. Now, we likely have some shoulder fatigue, right? That we're going to compensate for glute squeeze, core squeeze. Hold that as you start to tilt your torso forward, back into this half fold space. When you get there, the shoulders squeeze up. When you can no longer squeeze your shoulders, the torso starts to retract back to our original spot. And we'll do this one more time. We sweep up just to relax the shoulders, come right back down behind us, squeeze into the glutes, squeeze into the core, take your torso forward. Last time on this first side. When you get to your full space, the elbows, shoulders start to squeeze up. When you can no longer squeeze up, you start to retract the torso. Ooh, sweep those arms up. And now lock in that front foot. That front foot provides the stability as we go all the way through fold. Then bend the front knee, slide the left foot back and into lunge, and sweep yourself up into what is a very fatigued version of crescent. Fatigued in a different way than normal, though. Normally, it's all hamstring. Here you have some low back, you have some glute musculature, and you have the shoulder fatigue. Stabilize through that. Put the hands down on the mat. Nice work. Step that right foot back in the down dog. Balance out this depth here. Play here. Sweep the hips side to side. Find your way back into this neutral, stable alignment of down dog. And then once you feel stable, we'll take that left foot straight back and behind us. Bend the left knee. Gaze back towards that right heel. You can keep lifting that left knee, that left hip, as far as you want, as long as that right heel doesn't spin out. And then we're going to step that left foot forward and into lunge. From your lunge, we slide the right foot back or forward enough so that you can ground the heel. Bend that front knee and sweep yourself up. Then we find the strength in the front leg. So we want strength and activation in that front leg. Hands come behind us. We tilt ourselves forward. Gazes straight down. Shoulders start to squeeze up when there's no more room. We bring our torso back up to vertical. Sweep the arms up to relax and slide those hands back and behind us. Tilt the torso forward, reach the top of the head, squeeze the shoulders up, keep that strength in the toe mounds of both feet, and then the torso comes back up. Sweep the arms, head back. Last time here, we tilt the torso forward. Keep that glute squeeze turned on. Squeeze the shoulders at the full apex of the shape. When they can no longer lift, we lift the torso, sweep the arms up, and take yourself through forward fold. Bottom of the fold, we bend the knee, slide the right foot straight back into lunge, and sweep ourselves up. This nice little crescent space. Put the hands down on the mat. And we'll step that left foot back into down dog. And sway the hips here. Explore this depth here. Eventually, when you feel right, we're coming down to hands and knees and we're sliding back into child's pose. And the hands may want to come back to the heels here, right? That was a huge shoulder sequence. Relax. Put yourself in a shape where the shoulders can be fully relaxed. So this little girl just purely blissed out jumping in this circle. And this man looking very out of place, wearing a full brown suit, brown tilted hat, starts coming towards her, just cresting over this hill. And he is moving slowly, but he is the only thing on this road besides this girl. And she eventually catches him out of the corner of her eye, stops jumping, and runs straight at him. Runs straight up, wraps her arms around his legs and just says, "Welcome home, Dad." And the two grab each other hand in hand and they walk back and go into this dilapidated house. when you're right. When you're ready. Fingertips are going to grip into the mat. We're going to slide the hands back underneath the shoulders if they're not there. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're going to curl the toes, lift the seat, find the way back into down dog. Oh, feel the full depth, the full availability of your down dog, and then step or float to the front of the mat. From the front of the mat, we'll inhale back into half lift, take that reset, exhale all the way back into fold, then sweep yourself all the way up and overhead. Hands are going to come behind the head here. And so the same interlace we've been doing a little bit as of late, we're going to interlace behind the head. Thumbs are going to come down on the lateral side of the neck here. Now I want the thumbs to be a little bit below the skull. So we're going to come from this shape and we're going to try to keep our head exactly where it is. So the hands are going to try to hold the head as we sink the seat back in the chair. Now, obviously, the head's going to come with our torso, but we're going to try to get a little lift of the cervical spine as we sink down. So get that nice and tight cradle for the head, and then start to push the seat back, keep the belly taut, and keep those hands kind of like pulling against the sink here. And we'll hold this for just another 5 seconds. And we'll drive back up. Sweep the arms up, keep the interlace. And if you can go palms away, go palms away. If the palms feel best down, go palms down. And we're just going to hold this overhead now. Pull the chin back so that the ears are by the biceps, maybe even behind the biceps. And keep driving those arms up. No matter which direction the hands are facing, drive up as we pull back. And then relax and take yourself through fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sink the seat down towards the heels. And we will extend our legs out in front of us here, so that we have a nice seated fold in front of us, and we're just going to follow the leg extension right out into the shape. These follow folds are less structured, right? They are more of an opportunity for you to just go with where your body is wanting to go and to settle in, right? To trust our body after all of the work we've done from our standing shapes, to know where it wants to go to expand, and just follow it there. So give yourself another roughly 25 seconds here, just exploring what the body has brought you to at this point in practice. When you're right, when you're ready, we're gonna walk our seat back up to vertical and lower our spine onto the mat. For what is the first time this practice? Integrating, and again, allowing your body to go where it feels right. Knees can be bent, legs can be extended. You can even take the bottoms of the feet together and let the knees fall out wide, although I will warn you that we are headed there in this next sequence. So just note, if you're not looking for extra time there, we'll be headed there shortly. It does feel right for you when your body does feel like it's ready. Let's go ahead and let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. Now, as we get into this shape, looking for a little bit of surprising openness along that medial line. I think Yeah, I think we only opened up once in that Warrior 2 sequence. So kind of shocking the amount of space we've created from all of the shoulder work we've done. And I want this time to kind of be the opportunity to explore how open this medial line can get. But at the same time, I don't want you to overtax that system. So remember that there's always the opportunity. You can even make fists and shove them like kind of right next to the hips, or you can cradle the lateral edge of the quads here. But make sure that just because we're super open, we are not going past our musculature's ability to stabilize. We'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. So a couple years later, this little girl's a couple years older. She's out in front of that same ragged house with the same stick in her hand in the middle of the same abandoned road. Rural road, maybe not abandoned. Certainly not well trafficked. And she draws this perfect circle in the dirt. And then she takes this stick and she divides the circle with a line right down the middle. And as she completes that, this huge smile bursts across her face. She steps in, left foot on the left side of the circle, right foot on the right side of the circle. And she starts to jump. When you're right, when you're ready, knees come back up to neutral. Arms come open to cactus. And we start to sway those knees side to side. Moving dynamically here, but not being tempted to over rotate, not being tempted to press further than what our body wants. And at the same time, being willing to stop and seek out where our body feels like the edge exists, right? So if that is a full rotation and your lateral edge of your thigh is resting on the mat, wonderful. Can that top quad roll a little bit to accentuate the shape? If we're not all the way into rotation, can we just hang on where the musculature is wanting to pause our body? If there's any more room to expand before we go over to that second side. And about 20 more seconds of dynamic movement here. Just exploring and moving into those extra corners, those extra slices of room for the body. And then when you're right, just let the knees fall over to the next side. Whichever side you're headed towards, pause there. And as we pause there, remember that you still don't have to go to full rotation, right? So if you're not feeling like full rotation and you're headed towards the right, you can keep your right knee vertical and let your left knee fall in. I didn't mirror this, but the principle is the same, right? As we just have that single side internal rotation, that's fine. So keep in mind, you can prevent yourself from going all the way into the shape without the use of a prop, just by using that opposite leg. And then we'll get that balanced out when we go to the second side. So falling into a shape that feels appropriate for you. So this little girl starts to jump in this bisected circle. She starts to add some complexity. It's no longer just vertical. Our feet are now alternating inside and outside of the circle, crossing over lines, but never touching inside the circle on the same side, and never mixing or missing a beat. And then just over the hill, this brown hat starts to crest. This time she's waiting. She sees that brown hat. She takes off sprinting down the road, runs up to her father, wraps her arms around him, gives him a big hug, and says, "Welcome home." The two grab hands and walk back into this rundown little shack. When you're right, when you're ready, knees are going to return to neutral. And from that neutral space, we'll just let them fall over to the second side, keeping in mind that we don't, again, have to go into the full rotation. We can take that side we're twisting away from and just let that come into a vertical leg. About 6 or 7 years later, that same little girl, much more grown up, sitting inside the house. She's at this desk and she has this pile of books, like 1.5 feet high next to her. She's a notebook, 1.5 inches thick, and a pencil, and she's just feverishly writing things down, flipping through pages of books and writing. And as she's doing this, the door quietly opens behind her. When you're right, when you're ready, we're going to bring our knees back to neutral. The kneecaps are going to point towards the ceiling. And we're going to take the hands behind our head, creating that same cradling sensation that we did when we were in mountain and then chair. And then pulling those elbows out towards the edges of the room. So hands stay cradled, but elbows start to pull out. As the elbows start to pull out, there's a little subtle lift to the head. Keep that turned on as we press into the toe mounds and lift the belt line. And as that happens, as the belt line lifts, there's more room for the hands and the elbows to activate both up and out. Find that. And then keep that up and out energy in the hands as you release the tailbone back down to the mat. Let the head relax. Let the arms fall open to cactus. Let your awareness drift within you. And ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana. And if there is, as always, offer that to yourself. Let your body receive the things that it wants, that it needs, to be fully prepared to relax. And so this little girl doesn't even hear as the door opens behind her. And that man in the brown hat, brown suit, comes up, taps her on the shoulder. She jumps. She turns around, gives him a big hug. And he asks her how the homework is going. And she kind of rolls her eyes and she's like, "Oh." so much more to go. And she goes right back to writing, just nonstop, just working until she has to sharpen the pencil over and over again. When you are when you are ready, we're just gonna release ourselves completely and fully into a shape where we can appreciate Shavasana. Utilize any props. And just feel fully at ease. 20 years later, that same little girl, all grown up. She's sitting behind this massive desk in this impeccably decorated office on the top of some skyscraper with floor to ceiling windows looking out over Manhattan. And the phone on her desk rings. And it startles her from this daze she's in. And she picks up the phone and she gasps, drops the phone, and runs out of the room. Start to bring fingers in your toes. And less than 24 hours later, she's barreling down that same desolate road, southern India, in this huge black SUV, traveling way faster than is safe. And she comes screeching up to this same dilapidated house, barely standing at this point. She jumps out of the SUV and runs inside, sees her father on his deathbed. Start to bring some movement into your wrists and your ankles. She runs up to him and he says, "Welcome home, honey." She says, "I'm so glad I made it." Movement to your elbows and your knees, and your shoulders and your hips, and your neck and your head. And the two embrace. Eventually, we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. And in this seated space, our spine stacks, collarbones take that width we've worked on, and eyes closed. And as they're holding one another, he whispers into her ear, he says, "Honey, I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. I want you to be here for the last time. I want you to look around and see what you came from. This is nothing. And now look at what you are." And then she looks back at him and she says, "Dad, I will give anything to go back to those moments where I was jumping in the street." And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that there was something in your life, something that was nothing in your life, that brought you impeccable joy? Maybe it was a circle drawn on a dirt road. For me, it was always a ball of tape. And know that that same joy from nothing lives inside of you today. And see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy freaking Monday, guys. Boy, oh boy, that's a hard story to tell. I love that little girl. I appreciate the heck out of you. I will be back next Sunday to recharge, and we'll do this again next Monday. So nice to see you. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.